Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme. So I'm thrilled today to have on Lyme Time my friend and fellow warrior, Alexandra Moresco. I call her Allie. She calls me Allie. It works out great. Hopefully it won't be too confusing. But I interviewed her mother in another podcast, Linda, and it was just such an informative insight and look into what it is like to raise a child. I say raise, you got it later in life, but to be a parent of a child that has Lyme disease and very, very affected by Lyme disease at that, and to have been such an advocate for you. And so today we're talking to Allie about your journey, first and foremost, and also how you got into turning that brutal diagnosis into advocacy of your own. And maybe even a little bit about if that came from your parents. And so anyway, welcome, Allie.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like this is coming full circle because I've listened to the podcast for so long, and I've also had like friends on the podcast and stuff like that. And so I really wanted to chat with you personally. So thank you for inviting me to share.
I'm so excited you're here, and I'm so excited to just kind of get an overview. First, let's just start with your journey on Lyme disease. I know we're here to talk about advocacy, but let's get a little snapshot as to how it first appeared in your life. And then kind of how you segued that into advocacy.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, like so many others that have the same exact story as I do, I was in college when I was infected the end of my junior year. So to back up for a second, I live in Chicago. I'm a city person. I'm not like a woodsy out in the field, like type of girl. So Lyme disease never even crossed my thought process or my mind. But my husband was born and raised in Michigan. And every year his family goes up to northern Michigan. And I went with them the first year, that we started dating. And I came home from that trip, and we had what I was told by my GP was a summer flu. And then I started to get a rash that I still have 5 years later to this day, from my head to my toes. And, 2 years goes by. I have seen every specialist under the sun. I've been misdiagnosed with everything under the sun. And, was told, oh, there's nothing wrong. Or, I was in a very high stress, fast-paced career, or, oh, you need to slow down. You need to take a break. You're stressed, da, 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 da. It's all in your head. And then eventually I found a doctor at Northwestern that was like, I think you might have Lyme disease, and tested me for Lyme. And sure enough, that first time I was tested didn't come back CDC positive, but came back inconclusive. And thankfully he knew enough to send me to a specialist to do accurate testing. And sure enough, that's what it was. So that was the first little bit of my Lyme journey, which I think unfortunately is the same as everyone else's.
And if I remember correctly, your mother initially suspected Lyme disease and was shut down immediately by doctors.
Yeah, my mom grew up on the East Coast and was very familiar with Lyme, and had suggested it to my GP. And I'm so sorry if he barks. I don't know what's going on right now. And suggested it to my GP. And she, quote, said to my mother, anyone who tests her for Lyme disease is a charlatan. And those words will always stick with me. because it just is such a harsh way to put it. So yeah, my
Yeah,
poor
I mean,
mother, you know.
it would make her feel extremely um, almost quote unquote stupid for even going down that path. Like
Yeah,
it is such a statement and such a shut doorway that
yeah.
that must have been very hard for her to take, only to
Oh
be
yeah,
told later that it actually was what she suspected.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, you know, you, and I'm sure you feel the same way. You just trust your doctors until something happens, then you start doing your own research and you realize that um, everyone's human and people aren't always right about things, you know, despite their accreditation. So,
Well, I want to talk about how that then turned into Advocacy Express, because
mm,
you have somehow got this into your mind, and I know that you were always on board from day one helping the Lyme
mhm,
community. And at the end of this, I'll let everybody know how to get in touch with you and follow you. But you are a leader in terms of advocacy within this community. And I think everybody has either heard of you or follows you, or and just really trusts what you say. You're very aware of what's going on with Congress and what
mhm.
the latest bills are that need to be passed. And I just admire that so much. So how did you first sort of recognize that you wanted to go into this for Lyme disease? And also it's chronic illness as well, right?
Yeah. So there were quite a few, you know, steps in between me getting sick, getting Lyme, and then getting involved in like legislative advocacy. So I've been lucky enough to have a very close relationship with quite a few like Lyme nonprofits, but mostly Global Lyme Alliance. I myself, and along with a co-chair that very sadly passed away 2 years ago, in her battle with Lyme disease, we brought Global Lyme Alliance to the Midwest and really built a beautiful community here. And I've had the opportunity to fundraise with them across the US, in New York and Connecticut, in Palm Beach, and have had through that the opportunity to meet thousands of people, you know, battling Lyme all over. And, you know, the one sentiment I always hear, and I, you know, went through it myself, is that we're suffering, we're struggling, we need help, we need change, we need more than just research funded. So I personally find funding research and fundraising for research to be critically important, and it's something that I will always do. But eventually I started to kind of put the puzzle pieces together and realize that public and private partnerships are the key to this community moving forward and seeing true change. And that can't come until there is legislative change at a federal level. So 2 years ago, I started bothering just my local, you know, Illinois representatives and congressmen and women and senators to talk. And in these meetings, realized Lyme was not even a blip on their radar. They had no idea. And they didn't know to pay attention to it because the surveillance of tick-borne illnesses is so low that they don't know their constituents are impacted by it. And then last year, literally a couple of weeks before the pandemic hit and we went into lockdown, I spent a week in DC with Center for Lyme Action, lobbying representatives and politicians from across, you know, the Midwest. And that's when it really, really clicked for me that everyone has to get involved. And this is what's going to drive like true actionable change for our community. And I just want everyone to know out there, like, I do not have a degree in public policy. I am a publicist, you know, and I do influencer relations by trade. And I just educated myself and talked to experts, and anyone, you know, can get involved. It's not as hard as people think it is. So don't be scared by it.
I think it's very scary for a lot of people, and they think, okay, yeah, okay, I could donate $20 or $2,000 or whatever their donation would be, but then
Yeah.
I think they think that would be sort of the end of their story. and they don't really know where it's going. Can you tell us a little bit about, because you know the Lyme organization so well, can you let us know sort of the best websites for donations, maybe in a little bit about what they do, each one of them?
So if you're looking to donate for research specifically, personally, I love Global Lyme Alliance. I've worked with them for a long time, and my family chose to get involved with them because we sat years ago and read every single annual report for like all the main organizations, and they were the one where truly the money was going back to research and advocacy. And my father's on the board at GLA, so I fully trust what they're doing and where things are going, if they're making the right decisions and all of that good stuff. I also love Bay Area Lyme Foundation. They're doing a phenomenal job with research. They're doing a phenomenal job with advocacy, and now they're getting into the legislative advocacy game, which is awesome. And then as far as like patient focused, if you're looking to make like a donation that specifically helps someone in the Lyme community, I really love Lyme Treatment Foundation. A woman named Wendy is the founder. She has Lyme herself. She's a phenomenal human being, and they give grants to people, and it's not just limited to children. It's anyone that has Lyme disease. You can apply for a grant, and that money goes for your treatment, which is really phenomenal. And I know the community is in pretty dire need of that. So yeah.
Absolutely. And the second one you mentioned, you cut out something Lyme research. The second
Was
organization.
it Bay Area Lyme Foundation, maybe? Was they fund? It was Global Lyme Alliance, Bay Area Lyme,
Okay,
and then for more community focused, Lyme Treatment Foundation.
got it. Okay, great. Well, they're all doing such great work, and
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people out there want to be able to give, in terms
Yeah.
of just being able to start out with giving, and these sound like such great avenues, and also everybody wants to give to uh, a company or an organization that is established and very known
Yeah.
within the community. Um, Now, are there any specific things that come to mind, in terms of for children? Let's say there's a parent out there that is interested in giving back, or getting involved with a organization for children.
Yeah. The one that comes to mind for me is Live Lyme Foundation. They give treatment grants specifically to kids, and they are very established. Their annual report's great, and yeah, so because they're Holiday Goodrow, and Olivia Goodrow are the founders of Live Lyme, and she was diagnosed as a child, and Holiday is a true champion for not just children, but families and the entire community. So if you're looking to give back in that way, that's a great option.
Great. And Global Lyme Alliance, in terms of research, what types of research do you know of that are on the forefront right now?
So I love Global Lyme Alliance because they are really like the original Lyme organization, and there's like 8 or 9 things, and I'm having a Lyme brain moment and can't think of it off the top of my head. I can send it to you for the episode notes. There's 8 or 9 things that they were the first to fund research on, and back those things, and it's major drivers, that have led to major advancements in research, in how we think about Lyme, how we treat Lyme. And they're the ones actually that funded the research that confirmed that Lyme is persistent, as we all know, but for some reason is very widely doubted within the general medical community. So they do a lot of research in the US, outside of the US, and it kind of spans everything from like generalized treatment to more in-depth things. A few years ago, I helped them fundraise money in my co-chair's name that had passed, that was all about Lyme disease and spirochetes and how it impacts the brain. because so many people with Lyme, you know, have psychological issues and neurological issues, and it's not as widely accepted as like a general Lyme symptom, but we all know it happens because we experience it. So
Yeah.
we need that research, you know, to back it. But I mean, they're doing a lot of really great work all the time on a lot of different fronts. So I, as a patient, am very grateful.
Oh my gosh. Endless gratitude for all of these people behind the scenes.
My
And
gosh, yeah.
and I'm just so inspired that you were able to get your wits about yourself as you were struggling through your own Lyme journey, enough to start pouring your energy and whatever you had on reserve into just advocacy. So tell us a little bit about Advocacy Express and who
Yeah.
runs it and what the donation funds are used for.
So about a year ago now, after I went to DC, you know, you go and you're involved in a lobbying day and you realize what a machine the political system really is. And just to put it in perspective, for like an organization like Center for Lyme Action, which is purely a political advocacy firm that fights on behalf of Lyme and funding and legislation, all those things, for them to put on a single lobbying day and contract out a lobbying and advocacy firm that schedules and gets us the meetings and all of these things, it costs about $75,000 a day. So for, you know, your average like Joe Schmo, it's like me, we can't go do that every day, right?
Right.
So it was a wonderful week, you know, that we went and we spent doing this, but obviously not capable of doing that every week, you know, day in and day out. So the first day that we were there, we heard from, you know, Senator Suzanne Collins, who is a champion for the Kay-Hagan Tick Act, and Chris Smith, and the director of the directors of a couple of different government organizations. And what I took away from it, and like a light bulb went off in my head, was that senators, congressmen, women, representatives do not care about an issue unless there is outside pressure directly from their constituents. So Congress is reactive, they are not proactive. So it takes you and I letting our representatives know, I have Lyme disease, I am suffering, this is what I need to change, and I am a constituent living in your district. So my husband and I, who my husband was in politics before he went into consulting, he studied public policy, understands it in a totally different way than I do. We started thinking about, how do we make legislative advocacy accessible to your everyday person, not just from a financial standpoint, but also from a brain power standpoint. Because I don't know about you, but I struggle to sit and write a letter because of my Lyme brain. So we started thinking about it, and I started to get more involved with the legislative advocacy and putting calls out on Instagram. And it finally got to the point where I was getting between 500 and 600 people every time I would put these calls out that, you know, would say, yes, I want to send a letter. Can you send me a template? Da, 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 da. And it just got too much for like my Lyme brain to handle. So we started to play around with like, how do we automate this for people and make it easy? So we did about 6 months of research, talking to politicians, people that work in these politicians' offices, reading studies. And what we found is that letters, like a physical letter that is mailed to a congressman, woman, representative, senator, depending on what you're advocating for, is the only surefire way to have your communication documented. There is a study funded about 2 years ago from an outside organization from the government that found about 2/3 of emails and forms do not even get opened in political offices. So that's number one. Yep. And then if you call and you forget to give them your full name and your area code, that also does not get documented. whereas physical letters are the only form of communication that have to be physically opened and documented within a politician's office. So that's number one. Number two, I did not know this until I started educating myself on the system, but congressmen and women are the ones that attribute appropriations, which is funding. So that is why it is so important to put consistent pressure on our congressmen and our congresswomen, because ultimately they're the ones with the checkbooks that are giving the money to fund legislation. So for example, the Kay-Hagan-Tick Act, which was passed last year, just because it's passed doesn't mean that it's funded. So that's why that $91 million that was funded for the Kay-Hagan-Tick Act we were so excited, and it was so critical, because if a piece of legislation is passed but it's not funded, it really means nothing. It does nothing for our community, right? And then going back to the advocacy portion of this and sending the letters, it takes months and years really to get an issue on a representative's radar. So sending one letter, it's better than nothing, right? But sending a letter every week or every month, or letters all at one time, is really the way to do it. And when we had done our research, we learned that the minimum that someone like you or I need to reach out to our politicians, specifically congressmen and women, to advocate for a specific issue, the minimum amount that you need to reach out that really gets their attention is once a month. So what we ended up doing was, in our quest to make advocacy and political advocacy accessible to your everyday person that's not a policy expert, or maybe like me, doesn't have the brain power every week to sit and write a new letter, is we formed Advocacy Express, and we have a public policy expert that is constantly writing letters for tick-borne illness, Lyme disease, funding, CDC change, all of these things, is crafting these very well put together policy letters. And then we print them and we mail them for you. And the only cost to the person utilizing the service is the exact cost of our supplies. So like post, stamps, the physical letters, the envelopes, because we want advocacy to be accessible to everyone. And we do feel that there is a barrier if you maybe don't know about public policy or don't have the brain power. So really our only goal is to get people involved and get them physically sending letters on a regular basis. Because I've just realized that I can only do so much as one person. So now I need everyone else to, start bugging their representatives.
The tribe, and obviously, it takes probably hundreds of thousands of letters just pouring into offices. So let me just make sure I have this correct. So is it a membership-based advocacy
so we call it a subscription, because really, like, when you boil it down, if you were to place an order, there's 3 different options. You can send your representatives 1 letter a week, 1 letter a month, or we have something called a letter Blitz, which sends 100 letters all at one time. And that's meant for, let's say you're lobbying for a very certain piece of legislation or for certain funding. That's meant to be like an attention grabber in a politician's office and say, oh my God, I just got 100 letters about this. A constituent really wants this. Okay. So it's, there's 3 different subscriptions, and essentially all you do is you go on, and to send your representatives 13 letters, it's $12.99, which covers the cost of our supplies. And that's all you have to do. And I hate to say that, like, we're taking the work out of the advocacy, but for somebody that's already sick, right, that's a big piece of it. So it is technically a subscription where you subscribe, for a full calendar year. And then we, depending on which one you pick, we send a letter either once a week, once a month, or 100 letters at one time if you're advocating for a specific issue in mind. So
great. Okay, so that's just a subscription, and 13 letters per month.
So for the monthly subscription, it's 1 letter per month.
One letter
But
per.
because we're able to buy all of our supplies in bulk, we're able to essentially add like another letter. So there's 1 month out of the year then that we send 2 letters. So yeah.
We basically, it sounds so easy. We just sign up for your subscription. You get our our basic information. And
Yeah.
then we're billed about 12, $13 a month. And yet we will know that at minimum, we're, a couple of letters are going out, 1 to 2 letters are going out per month in our name. And and I'm sure that in your social media and whatnot, that you can tell us exactly where these letters are going and what for.
So just to
That's
back up for a
brilliant.
second, it's $13 for the entire year, not per month.
Oh, got it. Okay.
That's something that people were really confused about when it came out, is the $12.99, it covers all of the supplies for an entire year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is great. And then through basically, like, if you were to register and we got your address, you just register with obviously your own address and your area code, and then the program that we built out behind the website automatically matches, tells us who your representatives are. So it's like a very automatic thing. So you don't even have to tell us where you want them sent or to who. We just match it up and send them on out for you.
That's where I got confused, because I think I signed up and then I get letters about, I
Okay.
probably am on the newsletter, and
Okay.
so I'm aware that things are going on, but the fact that I now have the confidence and it's taken off my mental plate, so to speak,
Yeah.
that things are getting done, and just by, being able to just basically $1 a month. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
So within the Lyme community, what would you say are the areas that are in dire need of funding right now?
Oh my God, all of it. All of it needs funding. um, so I would say, and I don't want to discount any other category, but from what I have learned and from talking to politicians, from talking to researchers and organizations, surveillance is a big one. So, for example, in the state of Illinois, there is it's like $64,000 in the state budget is dedicated to fighting and combating Lyme disease and tick-borne diseases. But when you dig deeper into it, that literally only goes to paying one person's salary. All of the other research and initiatives are funded by grants. So obviously, because of COVID and a lot of grant money and funding being diverted to battling COVID, which we completely understand, a lot of the grants are drying up for a lot of these organizations that do surveillance. So surveillance basically means that we have like very highly accredited, not we, but the state and these research organizations have very highly accredited scientists, researchers, surveyors going out into different parts of the state and collecting ticks and mosquitoes and physically testing each tick and mosquito for different tick-borne diseases. And it's the surveillance numbers that drive like political interest in the congressmen and women committing funding to battling things like Lyme and other tick-borne diseases. But if we don't have proper surveillance, they are not going to put funding towards it, and nothing's going to change on a federal level. So personally, I would love to see more work done around surveillance and reporting of the numbers, because I know there is a researcher, Dr. Holly Tootin, who I absolutely adore, who does surveillance in Illinois. And as of the fall, when she was testing ticks and mosquitoes, about 40% of ticks that she was collecting were testing positive for at least one tick-borne disease. And that's just in the state of Illinois. Like, I can only imagine what that looks like in the entire country.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't think, at least I didn't know that if a tick was actually negative for carrying Lyme, so to speak, it still has hundreds and hundreds of just bacteria and nasty things that it's transferring, regardless
Yeah.
if it has Lyme disease or not. Not only that, but the saliva in and of itself
Hmm.
is so much. And if you spend any time outdoors, then you can just go ahead and layer on the mosquitoes and the spiders and the I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
So this I'm hopping on board with you in terms of the importance of surveillance.
Yeah.
Having been recently rebit by a tick and not
Yeah.
really realizing I was getting so many symptoms again out
Oh my
within 24
gosh.
hours. And yet my tick tested negative for Lyme disease, however, tested positive for, relapsing fever. And
Okay.
the whole time I'm thinking, nobody even knows this is going on, that
Yeah.
at all. It was
Yeah.
it's so scary. So I think that's a great place to start. What's the best feature of Advocacy Express what do you think sets it apart from others?
Well, I would say there's not really anything else like it. So many organizations focus solely on research or patient advocacy, and those are established, right? I don't want to say we don't need more of those, but thankfully, we've got a lot of great people on that front fighting for our rights, and looking into research and how to better the lives, of people living with Lyme, like you and I. But the true advantage of Advocacy Express is really that we are magnifying your voice. We're magnifying the voices of the Lyme community to actually make them heard, because there's such a great community that's advocating and educating on social media, but that is not taken into account in these representatives' offices. So it's like, how do we take all these wonderful advocates and help to lift up their voices to drive true actionable change for you and I and for our community as a whole? And we've started to, well, number one, I think we now know, thankfully, that it's working as we suspected it would, because that $91 million was funded a couple of weeks ago. And number two, it's been such a cool thing to get our subscribers and our fellow advocates responses that they've been getting from congressmen and women and representatives and senators. People have been forwarding us the responses that they've been getting, and it's been a really wonderful thing to see.
Oh, how
Um,
fulfilling for you too. Oh my gosh.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. What do you envision Advocacy Express accomplishing in the future? What are some of your visions?
We just hope to be of assistance with any legislation and funding, that these groups like Center for Lyme Action or individuals are trying to pass. And, we ultimately at the highest level just want to drive change for our entire community so that people don't have to struggle, to pay for their treatment. And so Lyme disease becomes a more widely recognized diagnosis for insurance companies. And so the CDC updates its guidelines, and there's better surveillance and better testing. And at a very high level, that's what we hope to accomplish. On just a personal level, I just hope that this makes people like you and I that aren't politicians and aren't going into these offices, I just hope it helps people use their voice and makes them feel valued and heard. And like everyday people like you and I can drive change too. Anyone can do it. It's just about making it easy. So
I think it's all part of our medicine is to feel as though we are somehow taking control of our health.
yeah,
And if it means writing letters from our computer laptop while we're in bed or resting, that's actually probably the very, very best thing that anybody can do. Um,
yeah, oh
and
yeah.
and also, do you ever see it expanding outside of Lyme disease for Advocacy Express?
Yeah, so we actually the great thing about this is that since we have all of the resources already in place, we can really advocate on behalf of any cause. So I have three very, very close friends that were all furloughed during the pandemic from restaurants. So we actually launched a second letter for restaurant relief. And we also have a form on the website where you can submit a topic, or we can do custom letters and have our policy expert, write custom letters for you. Yeah, like I said, even outside of Lyme disease, we just want to make this accessible for everyone. So if anyone listening has something very specific that they want to advocate on behalf of, always reach out, or go to advocacyexpress.com and submit a form. I'm always happy, to help with every and any cause. So.
I feel like you're very, very accessible on social media. I really do. I feel like you respond to a lot more than you probably necessarily have to. Anybody that reaches out and has questions should definitely reach out to you. And, last but not least, do you sort of once we're past this ferocious pandemic situation, do you see yourself rallying all of us together and keeping us aware of any things happening on Capitol Hill?
Oh yeah. So going back to, there's a phenomenal advocacy organization called Center for Lyme Action, and they normally once a year put together a lobbying day, and anyone can participate, and it's typically a fly-in. You fly in for a week and you meet with representatives, and it's honestly one of the best things I've ever done. So I hope to God that, in 2021 or 2022, we can get back to that physically, shaking hands and having conversations. But until then, I try my best to keep people updated on the current happenings, whether it's with Lyme legislation and politics, whether it's with research or just things, going on in the community. I try my best on Instagram and through emails to keep everyone in the loop. So until the pandemic is over, we're stuck with Zoom and emails and things like that. But I'm happy I can still chat with people and see your face, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. And you have everybody's attention right now, which is a good thing. So I think the more, subscriptions that you can put together right now, and then once it is time to be able to go in person, it's going to be that much stronger for you.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you again for taking your time. And you are just such a sweetheart, and you have a way of really making it easy and also making it feel really good for people to start standing up for themselves and taking their health into their own hands, and feel as though, since they have in most cases been turned away or down or aside from the medical community, this is a way to reclaim their voice. And I think that is the most important medicine of all. And so can you tell us one last time where our listeners can find you and your organization?
So the best place to find me directly, honestly, is Instagram at @Moresco. And if you're interested in learning more specifically about Advocacy Express, or hopefully sending your representatives some letters and joining us in the legislative fight, you can go to advocacyexpress.com, and all the information is there.
We will. And I know that so many good things are to come, and I can't wait to see what you do with this amazing, amazing organization. I'm just so excited for you. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll come back and give us some updates.
Oh my gosh. Of course. Thank you for having me. After I got sick, I said I will literally dedicate the rest of my life to making the world a better place for people living with tick-borne disease, and I fully intend to live up to that. So thank you for giving me a platform to share some of my mission. So I always appreciate you and everything you do. You are a wonderful human being. So
thank you. Right back at you. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you again.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Of course. Bye, Allie.